today's video, we're going to learn about more digital camera terms, and we're also going to move on to learn about the various shooting modes that are possible. Let us go over to Mr. Desikan Krishnan, who is going to explain all of these to us.
Let us get to know some digital camera terms. VR and VR high. VR stands for vibration reduction. What happens is, when you put your lens on VR, you will be able to shoot at a slower shutter speed. When I mean slower shutter speed, I don't mean 1 second and half a second and all that. For example, if you can keep your camera steady at, let's say, 1/60th of a second, if you put it on VR, you would be able to shoot it at 1/30 or even 1/15th. There are elements in the camera which moves in the opposite direction of where your shutter presses the button and corrects that minor amount of shake that could happen. That is VR. VR high is when you are traveling in a vehicle. When you are traveling in a vehicle and you want to shoot something, then you put it on VR high. It compensates for the lateral movement also. Nikon calls it VR, Canon calls it IS, which is image stabilization. IS stands for image stabilization. Canon uses IS, whereas Nikon uses VR. Both are the same. Then you have the AEL. It is auto exposure lock. What happens is, you frame a subject. Okay, you are shooting something, let us say, in difficult lighting conditions. You are shooting something against the light. You have placed a person standing there and you want him well lit. So what you can do is zoom in or go close to him, take a reading for him, keep the AEL button locked, come back, reframe your photograph and shoot. The exposure will be not for the background but for the person where you have locked the exposure with. That is the auto exposure lock. Then you have the auto focus lock. You're taking a panorama, you're taking a large view of, let us say, a lake or a mountain or a landscape, where again you want the person standing in front in focus. So you focus on that person, go close to the person or zoom into the person, focus on him, lock the focus, come back, do your composition and shoot. The focus again, that is the auto focus lock. So you have learned two things. One is the auto exposure lock, another one is the auto focus lock. We are now going to learn how to use or operate your digital camera. The shooting modes are the most important. You see the dial over there in the photograph? That is where your shooting modes are. In any camera, it will be on the right hand side, top color. Right. Now let me explain the modes. You have the symbol P. P stands for the program mode. Here the camera is programmed to set the aperture and the shutter speed depending on light available, and it will be accurate, always right. You only have to set the ISO. Rest of the things the camera would take care. You then have the S mode, which is the shutter priority mode, where you prioritize, you decide whatever shutter speed you want to shoot at, and the camera will choose the right aperture for it. Of course, ISO you have to set, and the camera will choose the right aperture for it. If it is beyond the scope of the camera's aperture, supposing shooting something indoor, you have chosen a shutter speed of 1/125 and your camera has got only up to 3.5, you will get a signal. You will hear a beep, or there will be some light blinking saying that it's not suited, it is underexposed. You will get some sort of a signal inside the camera. Nikon calls it S, Canon calls it TV, time value. In Canon cameras, you will not have the S, you will have the TV. The next one is A, which is the aperture priority mode. You decide whatever aperture you want to set at, and the camera will choose the right shutter speed for it. Canons will have it as AV, which is aperture value. So, aperture priority mode, whenever you want depth of field, whenever you want this thing, so you want greater depth of field, then you set it at 16. When you do not want depth of field, you set it at 3.5 or 1.4 depending on the lens which you have. In all this, both the shutter priority and aperture priority, if you look inside your camera, the viewfinder, there will be an indication if you are in shutter priority at what aperture the camera is set, and if you are in aperture priority at what shutter speed the camera is shooting. So, you would be able to see both. Okay. Then of course, there is the M, which is the manual mode, where you have to set both. You have to set the shutter speed and the aperture. There would be an exposure meter inside the camera to guide you. You can either set the shutter speed and accordingly change the aperture, or set the aperture till you get the right exposure, or you can set the aperture and keep turning the shutter speed till you get to the right exposure. There would be indications inside. There will be a separate thing on how to read the camera meter. Do not worry about it right now. Then of course, you have the auto mode, where the camera sets everything. Auto mode is something like the program mode, but there are slight differences. In the program mode, if the camera is chosen, let us say a shutter speed of 1/125 and an aperture of f8, you do not want to shoot at that combination. You can go to 60 f11 or anything in that scale, whereas in the auto mode you can't change that. Whatever the camera says, you have to shoot. Again, in the program mode, flash guns, you can, even in bright light you can get the flash on, or even in low light you can put the flash off. But in the auto mode, the pop-up flash will come on automatically if the light falls below a certain level. These are probably the two main differences between the program mode and the auto mode, and some cameras give you the flexibility of changing the ISO in the auto mode, some cameras do not. Since you know what shutter speeds are for, what apertures are for, I would advise you to either get used to shooting in the shutter priority mode or the aperture priority mode. Do not go to the program mode, will not learn anything. Try shooting. It is not required that you have to shoot in the manual mode, no. Initially to learn apertures you can, but try getting used to shooting in the shutter priority mode, and inside you will be able to read the aperture which the camera has set. If you do not like that aperture, you can always go to a higher shutter speed or a lower shutter speed, faster or slower shutter speed. I shoot always in the shutter priority mode. I keep my shutter speed at 1/125 or 1/250. Now, if I want more depth of field, if I feel that the aperture is set at f4, then I would come down to a slower shutter speed. If I want more depth of field, if I don't want depth of field, I would go to a faster shutter speed. So, all this, once you start to take a few pictures, a couple of hundred pictures you shoot, then all this would become second nature. So, you do not have to worry too much about it, but first is to start to shoot. First, take your cameras out, start to shoot, shoot in the program mode, shoot in the shutter priority mode, shoot in the aperture priority mode, and shoot in the manual mode, and see what happens, see how your image comes out. Now, whichever mode you are comfortable with, try sticking to it on most occasions, so that you have some level of consistency. As a thumb rule, whenever you are putting the camera back in your bag, I always set it at the program mode, so that if there is I am a press photographer. So, suddenly if I have to go, or suddenly if I have to take a photograph, the program mode would give me some picture. So, it is better when you put your camera bag into your bag, put it in the program mode and keep it. When you take it out, when you have the time, go to the aperture priority mode or the shutter priority mode, whichever you are comfortable with.
We hope that this video helped you to learn about the various shooting modes that are available on a digital camera. We have learned about various shooting modes that include the program mode, the aperture priority mode, the shutter priority mode, the manual mode, and the auto mode. Now, it is up to you which mode you wish to use to get a desired photograph. Initially, it would be helpful if you use the program mode, because a lot of the decisions would be taken for you by the camera. However, you must explore the various shooting modes that are available so that you can gain confidence and make the pictures that you want to.